It's a scorching day in America, a day when we should be moving toward the justice we were promised. Yet here we are, trapped in a swamp of lies and double standards. Today, we need to talk about a man who is meant to represent justice, fairness, and the core principles of our legal system, but instead embodies much of what's wrong with this country. I'm talking about Judge Clarence Thomas. Now, you might be thinking this is just another critique, another rant. But if we don't confront the truth about his actions, if we don't call them out, then we become complicit in the same system that has oppressed Black Americans for generations. Thomas sits in a position of immense power, shaping the very laws that govern our lives. Yet when it comes to protecting the interests of Black people, he is often absent. He is supposed to be a symbol of justice, but time and again, he sides with the powerful, the very forces that uphold systems of oppression, rather than the people he is meant to serve. Those who look to him as a champion for their rights are repeatedly met with betrayal. Let's start with the basics. Clarence Thomas was appointed to the Supreme Court in 1991, a seat meant to represent the highest ideals of justice and the protection of rights for all Americans. He was expected to uphold the Constitution, defend the oppressed, stand for the vulnerable, and ensure justice remained blind, untainted by privilege or power. From the start, however, questions surrounded his appointment. His confirmation was anything but straightforward. It was mired in controversy, allegations, and a bitter public spectacle that still casts a shadow over the court's integrity. If we are honest, his confirmation reflected politics more than merit. The Senate was supposed to scrutinize his qualifications, but instead, the process became a spectacle, failing to hold him accountable. And we cannot forget the allegations of sexual harassment that shook the nation. Anita Hill, a brave woman, came forward in 1991 to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. She risked everything to expose the harassment she endured while working with Thomas at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Hill detailed inappropriate comments, crude remarks about sexuality, and a toxic work environment. A story far too familiar to women across the country. Her testimony was an act of courage, speaking truth in the face of immense power. She stood against a system that preferred silence, knowing the personal and professional risks, and yet her words were largely dismissed, leaving a stain on the very notion of accountability that justice requires. She risked everything: her reputation, her career, her personal safety, and perhaps most painfully, the chance of being disbelieved and humiliated before the entire nation. The Senate, the very body entrusted to represent the people and uphold justice, had a moment to prove its moral fiber. This was the test of our democracy. The Judiciary Committee could have listened, investigated thoroughly, and acted with integrity. But instead, they turned their backs. Anita Hill was belittled, her character attacked, and her testimony dismissed. Rather than honoring her courage, they attempted to destroy her, painting her as a woman with ulterior motives, trying to settle a personal vendetta. And Clarence Thomas, he denied everything. He framed himself as a victim, calling the allegations a high-tech lynching, invoking racial oppression to deflect from the serious accusations. He attempted to shift the focus from his conduct to race, implying that being Black gave him immunity from accountability. It was a calculated maneuver, using his position and the language of race to manipulate public perception. The Senate didn't care about truth. They didn't care about Hill, or the hundreds of women facing harassment in workplaces across the country. Their concern was power politics and ensuring the future of a conservative agenda. Thomas was more than a nominee to them. He was a tool, a man who could shape the Supreme Court for decades, cementing ideologies favorable to those in power. So, despite explosive testimony, public outrage, and the weight of serious allegations, Clarence Thomas was confirmed to the Supreme Court. The process wasn't just flawed, it was a farce. It stained both the integrity of the Senate and the judicial system, burying truth under political ambition, where power mattered far more than justice. And Clarence Thomas, the man who was supposed to be the ultimate protector of justice, became a product of the very system he was meant to serve. His confirmation was never just about him. It was about a system that failed to protect women, that refused to believe survivors, and that repeatedly showed that when power is on the line, justice becomes secondary. Anita Hill's testimony wasn't merely ignored. It was gaslit, minimized, and reduced to a political footnote. Her words and experience were treated as inconveniences to the real goal, getting Clarence Thomas onto the Supreme Court. Now, 30 years later, we see the consequences. Thomas has served on the Supreme Court for more than 3 decades, shaping laws and policies that affect millions of Americans, including millions of Black Americans. Yet each time his name appears in the headlines, it's a reminder that a man who rose amid such controversy has remained entrenched in a system that continues to serve the powerful and the elite. For Black Americans, women, and other marginalized groups, the question isn't only about his actions in 1991. It's about what those actions represented: a failure of justice, a failure of accountability, and a refusal to hold those in power to the standards they demand of others. Instead, Thomas has used his position to cement a legacy as divisive as it is dangerous. Each ruling he makes reminds us that the system failed once and continues to fail today. Anita Hill's testimony was more than courage. It was a warning that the systems of power in this country don't always work as they should. That when we look to those in power to uphold justice, sometimes all we get is silence. Thomas's confirmation reflected a system more interested in protecting the powerful than the truth. That has become his legacy, not just for the Supreme Court, but for the American people. From that moment, it was clear Thomas's rise wasn't about justice. It was about power. Power that would not serve those who need it most. Power that would silence Black Americans struggling against a system historically against them. Today, we see this pattern repeatedly. From voting rights to affirmative action, from criminal justice to police brutality, Thomas has often sided not with the oppressed, but with the status quo. Take voting rights, for example. Remember the Shelby County v. Holder case, where the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a law meant to protect Black voters in the South. The majority opinion was written by Clarence Thomas. A Black man on the nation's highest court weakened the very law designed to protect Black voters, buying into the myth that discrimination is a thing of the past and the playing field is level. That decision insults every Black voter who has faced harassment, intimidation, or suppression, and dishonors the memory of civil rights activists who fought for these rights. And then there's affirmative action, a tool that has helped level the playing field for Black Americans in education and employment. Thomas has spent years attacking it, chipping away at the policies that promote equity, as if the field were already equal. But we know the reality: the playing field is still far from level, and his actions reflect a persistent disregard for the systemic barriers Black Americans continue to face. When it comes to jobs and opportunities, Black Americans are still climbing an uphill battle. Clarence Thomas acts as if the playing field is magically level, but we don't see Black people sitting at the same tables as those benefiting from centuries of privilege. Thomas, the so-called originalist, argues that the Constitution doesn't guarantee special protections for marginalized groups, that we should follow strictly what the Founding Fathers intended. Let's be clear, the Founding Fathers never intended Black people to be free or to have equal rights. So when Thomas leans on originalism, the message is unmistakable: Black lives don't matter, Black opportunities don't matter, Black struggles don't matter. He rewrites history, pretending America is post-racial, while the system remains rigged. And if that weren't enough, there are his conflicts of interest. Thomas has repeatedly refused to recuse himself from cases where clear conflicts exist. His wife, Ginny Thomas, has been deeply involved in right-wing politics, even attempting to overturn the 2020 election by pressuring politicians. How can a judge claim impartiality while his spouse is actively working to undermine democracy? It's a blatant conflict of interest, yet Thomas refuses to step aside. Where is the justice in that? The scandals don't stop there. After more than 3 decades on the Supreme Court, Thomas has been revealed to accept luxury gifts from wealthy conservative donors, private jets, lavish vacations, and other perks, all undisclosed. Any other judge would face consequences, but not Thomas. He is treated as untouchable, above the law, a tool for the elite to maintain a system that has oppressed black Americans for generations. Don't be fooled by the fact that he is black. Yes, he is, but he has sold out his own community. He made a deal with power, and now he uses his position to keep others at the bottom. He is not an exception. He is a symbol of how the system co-opts individuals from marginalized communities, turning them into agents of the forces that oppress those very communities. This is not personal, it's systemic. It's about how people in power, regardless of race, use their positions to maintain the status quo. Black Americans are often used as pawns in a game designed for us to lose. Thomas might be black, but he doesn't represent us. He represents those who have held us down for centuries. Time and again, when black Americans rise up, demand equality, or fight for justice, the system pushes back. It attempts to silence us, diminish our voices, and even co-opt those among us who might lead change. Clarence Thomas is a perfect example. He is a living testament to how the system subverts the voices that should be leading the fight for justice. Those who should understand our struggles and amplify our voices instead enforce the system that oppresses us. Thomas has not been a champion for black Americans. He has sided with the system that has kept us down for centuries. Every time his name appears on a court ruling that harms black communities, remember this: he is not serving us. He is not serving justice. He is serving a broken system. The system is fundamentally and irreparably broken. It uses Clarence Thomas, a black man, as a tool of oppression. A man co-opted to serve the very interests that have long worked to deny black Americans equality, dignity, and basic human rights. Thomas could have been different. He could have been a beacon of hope, a voice for justice, someone who used his position on the nation's highest court to amplify the voices of the oppressed. But instead, he has consistently done the opposite. Time and again, when the moment called for him to stand up for the marginalized, he sided with the powerful, the wealthy, the privileged, and the institutions determined to keep black Americans in their place. Look at the system itself. America's history is one of oppression. From slavery to Jim Crow, from the criminal justice system to economic disenfranchisement, black Americans have been systematically denied the opportunities others enjoy. This history is etched into our collective memory, and when black Americans rise to demand justice, the system pushes back. It uses every tool at its disposal: lobbyists, media narratives, corporate interests, and even the legal system, to maintain the status quo. Clarence Thomas was supposed to understand this struggle. He was supposed to recognize the flaws, inequities, and injustices that have plagued black America. Instead, he has become one of the enforcers of that system. Thomas is not an anomaly. He is a product of a system that takes those meant to uphold justice and turns them into agents of oppression. Just as laws and institutions have been used to suppress black communities, Thomas has been opted to serve these same interests. By consistently voting against the rights and protections black Americans need, he has become a cog in the machine we fight against. Consider the rulings Thomas has supported on the Supreme Court. Time and again, he has sided with the conservative majority to weaken civil rights protections, gut voting rights, dismantle affirmative action, and endorse policies that disproportionately harm black communities. Each decision strikes a blow to the very people who need justice the most, and Thomas votes in favor of them. He is not serving the people, he is serving the system, reinforcing power structures built over centuries to keep black Americans oppressed. Take voting rights as a case in point. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a historic victory for black Americans, a triumph hard-won through decades of struggle and sacrifice. Yet in 2013, Thomas was part of the Supreme Court majority in Shelby County v. Holder that gutted a key provision of that act, a decision that undermined the protections black voters fought so hard to secure. This provision was the cornerstone of the law designed to protect voters in states with a history of racial discrimination. By striking it down, the court opened the door for states to pass voter suppression laws that disproportionately target black voters. This wasn't just a policy choice. It was an ideological one. It revealed exactly where Thomas stands, not with the disenfranchised, but with the powerful. He voted to dismantle the very protections that allowed black Americans to participate fully in democracy, effectively silencing our voices at the ballot box. And what was his reasoning? That the country had made enough progress and that discrimination was no longer a major problem. This kind of thinking isn't just out of touch. It's dangerous. It shows a complete disconnect from the realities of life for black Americans today. The same applies to affirmative action, another area where Thomas has actively resisted progress. Affirmative action has long been a crucial tool to level the playing field in education and employment for black Americans. It has helped counter centuries of institutionalized discrimination that have blocked access to higher education, good jobs, and opportunities for upward mobility. Yet Thomas has positioned himself as one of the court's most vocal opponents of these programs. He argues they are no longer necessary, claiming that merit alone should determine admissions and hiring, while ignoring the ongoing effects of systemic inequality. For Thomas, the solution to racial inequality seems to be pretending it doesn't exist. He acts as if black Americans no longer need special consideration, claiming society has progressed enough. But progress for whom? Certainly not for the majority of black Americans who still encounter discrimination at every level. From classrooms to workplaces, from neighborhoods to courtrooms. By pushing to eliminate affirmative action, Clarence Thomas has chosen to turn his back on the very people he should be standing up for. This is the reality we face. Thomas is not an exception. He's the rule. He embodies how the system co-opts individuals who should fight for justice, and instead turns them into instruments of oppression. The irony is bitter. A black man in a position of power, using his influence to uphold policies and ideologies that harm the very community he is supposed to represent. So, when you see his name in the headlines, when you hear that Thomas has voted against the interests of black Americans, remember this: he is not serving us. He is not serving justice. He is serving the system. And that system is broken. It uses black faces to advance the interests of the powerful, maintaining structures that were never built for us. Until that system is fundamentally changed, Thomas will continue to be one of its most loyal foot soldiers, pushing back against the justice we are fighting for. Consider police brutality. Time and again, black bodies have been abused, brutalized, and murdered by those meant to protect them. Yet Thomas remains silent. He refuses to confront the systemic violence that allows these atrocities to persist. He sides with law enforcement and the powers that be, not the communities that are dying in the streets. This is more than a failure of justice. It's a betrayal of those who need it most. Clarence Thomas is more than a man in a robe. He is a symbol of the failures within the justice system. His seat on the Supreme Court reflects how power structures, both overt and hidden, continue to shape the fate of black Americans. Thomas represents something far deeper than a single individual on the nation's highest bench. He is a living testament to how the system can manipulate and weaponize black people against their own communities, rewarding them for perpetuating the oppression they were meant to fight. The Supreme Court was supposed to be blind, impartial, and fair. A place where the oppressed could seek protection, the voiceless could be heard, and the vulnerable could find justice against the powerful. Yet Thomas has spent his career doing the opposite. He has used his position not to uplift black Americans, but to protect the interests of those who have historically sought to silence us. He has supported policies that undermine voting rights, block economic opportunity, weaken affirmative action, and preserve a status quo that has never worked in favor of black Americans. And he is not alone. Thomas is part of a long line of individuals co-opted by the system, turned into pawns to maintain entrenched power structures. It's not just Clarence Thomas's individual decisions that matter. It's the larger, more insidious way the system operates. We've seen this pattern before. Those in power are willing to turn even their own against the people they should be serving if it means protecting the hierarchy that benefits them. Thomas's career is a textbook example of this manipulation at work. The danger of Clarence Thomas lies in how he is framed. He is often presented as a success story, a black man who made it within the system, proof that anyone can rise if they pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But this narrative is misleading, even dangerous. It erases the realities of systemic racism, structural inequalities, and centuries of black Americans being pushed to the margins. Thomas wants us to believe that hard work alone is enough, ignoring that the system itself is rigged to prevent black Americans from truly thriving. We cannot afford to stay silent. We cannot allow Thomas to remain unaccountable while wielding immense power over millions of lives. Every time he votes to uphold policies that harm black communities, every time he sidelines our needs and interests, he reinforces the message that black lives don't matter, that our struggles are secondary, and that the status quo is acceptable. This isn't about one man alone. It's about a system that allows people like him to thrive, while the rest of us are left behind. Clarence Thomas is not an anomaly. He is part of a larger, more insidious pattern in which the justice system favors the powerful and punishes the marginalized. This system was never designed with black Americans in mind. It was built to protect elite interests. People like Thomas are the tools that keep it intact, opting black voices to defend oppression, blind to the suffering of their own communities. But it doesn't have to be this way. We cannot remain passive as Thomas continues to perpetuate this cycle. This fight is bigger than one man. It's about a broken system that allows those in power to manipulate and exploit the very people who should be their strongest allies in the pursuit of justice. It's time to stop letting individuals like Clarence Thomas continue the damage to black communities. We must demand accountability, not just from him, but from the system that sustains him. The cost of inaction is too high, and the stakes are too great.